If you can list the fucked up things that have happened in your life and you can put that on a list and you somehow made it past all of this to be in a position where you can still go make some stuff happen, that's what you have in common with every hero of every story, of every autobiography, of every is that is how much happened to you that should have broke you, that did not break you, so that you were able to then fucking ride. Amen. Amen.
All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, today is our usual Wheel of Time day, but we're actually transitioning that to our just fiction and what we would call it art in real life,
Mm-hmm.
narrative type programming, because we're going to expand to other things. And today we're expanding to, and spoiler alerts ahead of time, Stranger Things. We're going to go over it, and we're going to probably have examples from the entire series.
Yeah,
So
we're gonna talk about the whole series, but more the themes of the series, why it worked, why it didn't work, when it didn't work, um, and for that reason, for what he was saying there to that was Cat Williams, right?
that
Talking
was
to
Cat Williams,
Theo,
yeah.
talking to Theo Vaughn, and I mean, he just encapsulates what we've been rambling about for
Yeah, especially
weeks
the Wheel
now
of
about
Time.
why
It's the
stories
yeah,
matter.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's the hero's journey, and we have three main guy heroes and basically three main female heroes in that series. And we have a similar dynamic in Stranger Things. And again, we're going to kind of contrast really good writing back then versus modern writing now, and where they got it right, where they got it wrong. And
You know, the two things popped into my head when Cat Williams was talking there about, hey, this is every story, this is every hero's journey, this is every autobiography. And so two things popped into my head, a story and an autobiography. And I've made this point before, but it infuriated. I feel like it's finally starting to die down a little bit. But when CRT, before it became DEI, was really starting to take over in this space, and you had to have characters that looked like you. A a a black person could not identify with Captain America. You have to have Black Panther. A
no,
woman
that's not
could
the
not
egregious one.
identify
Black
with
Panther
Iron
was,
Man. You
yeah.
have to have, Captain Marvel.
That's not the egregious one. The egregious one wasn't Captain America versus Black Panther because Black Panther was Black
Mhm.
Panther. It was that they had to replace Captain America.
Yes. That
Yeah,
came later, and that's
yeah.
that's when they really jumped the shark on the CRT. But my point was always, I'm sorry, if you are anybody and you can't be inspired by basically what Cat Williams was saying there was Captain America before he becomes Captain America, when he's just scrawny Steve Rogers standing up saying, "Hey, I could do this all day." And 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 that is what the story is teaching you is Steve Rogers before he becomes Captain America. Hey, list all that crap that you've had to deal with in your life, and you're still standing, just looking at life, saying, "Hey, I could do this all day." Autobiography is an example I've used before of um, a, one I read when I was really young. It was, uh, written for youth, but a biography of Jackie Robinson. And if you can't be inspired by that, no matter who you are, no matter what you're going through, because his character and the way he dealt with the adversity in front of him should be a great inspiration to anyone. And it doesn't have to be just, oh, well, I am facing some kind of racial injustice, so I am going to, read and be inspired by Jack. No, any kind of injustice, any kind of people looking down on you, you know you should be able to take inspiration from that and learn lessons from that helps build you up. And that's essentially what he was saying there is, hey, build yourself up by listing all this crap and looking back and saying, huh, you know what, I've I've done okay because I'm still here.
Yeah, what was that? What was that? Yeah, Rod Smart. I had to look it up. He was the football player that ended up playing in the XFL, and he changed his name to He Hate Me, and because he had that chip on his shoulder. he hate me,
Yeah.
and he ended up having a pretty good career. So
Yeah, I had forgotten about that one. That was
because
a
you
good
you were
one.
talking about anything that stands in your way. A lot of us have something that stands in our way. Some people got the silver spoon in their mouth, but even then, we've talked about being spoiled is bad
Hmm.
because that is actually a barrier to your success because you never learn how to work. And in fact, the trust fund baby actually has very low percentage success rates when it comes to building future wealth. Yeah, we look at the Trumps of the world or who else inherited part of the money and then made it bigger, but that's actually the rarity.
Yes.
The trust
Well,
fund babies actually tend to have very poor work ethics. They're very entitled and they tend to blow their money.
a lot of what are called the robber barons of the late 1800s, early 1900s, most of those, or I won't say most, but they don't all exist anymore. The
Hmm.
ones that do still exist, like the Rockefellers, are primarily because they don't run the money anymore. Somebody else does. They
Hmm.
just live off the interest, yeah, of that capital that was built by someone else. Um, and I think that's a lot of why storytelling is so crappy now, is because they're not really telling their own stories. It's essentially what's why I've been ranting about fan fiction the last few weeks, is because there's nothing wrong with writing in someone else's world, and it can be done very well. Some of my favorite fiction books are Timothy Zahn's Star Wars books, and he's writing in George Lucas's world, but he is making it his own.
Hmm.
And he's Wheel of Time. I say this when we were recording? I'm I think I mentioned it to
Just
you,
say it
but
again because it'll be
yeah.
it'll be off people's memory
Um,
anyways.
Credit where it's due. Because I had said that one of my favorite scenes in the whole series was at the very, very end when Rand spars with his father. And it's not just I need some exercise. It's his dad is trying to teach him one last lesson. And it is a phenomenal scene. And we'd thought that most, if not all, of the Rand stuff in the last three books were written by RJ before he died, just because they felt so much like him compared to some of the other stuff where you could really tell this is Sanderson. Turns out I was wrong as I was reading through the Q&A database. Not only did Sanderson write that scene, he came up with that scene. That was his invention. He was the one who said to Harriet, "Hey, I think we need a scene here with Rand and Tam
Hmm.
before the end." He wrote that scene and it is phenomenal. So again, he's writing in RJ's world with his characters, but he's doing it in a way that expresses his own abilities and talents in much the same way that Peter Jackson did with Lord of the Rings. And
Hmm.
you can find clips of him talking about the one thing we didn't want to do is insert ourselves into Tolkien's world. Any change we made, it was always with the idea of, is this the best way to express what Tolkien was trying to express with his story?
Hmm. Well, and let's go ahead and dive into the show and actually start. I think we can start with the similarities to what we've been talking about with
Mm.
Wheel of Time. Is we've got a group of close friend, a close friend group of young boys that have an activity they share together, and uh, they're basically like family to each other, and they're thrust into a situation that is something we don't have to deal with in real life because it's supernatural, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have the normal day-to-day problems. We have the bully at school and everything. I see Robert Frank always wears that bring bullying back. They have to deal with those normal things, but then this paranormal thing comes into everybody's life and they're like thrust in the middle because they find someone. And so similar to the Wheel of Time, where it's these three normal guys just going to Beltane and hanging out together and trying to, just get their chores done so they can do the things they want to do together and see the Gleeman and everything. And Supernatural comes into the village, right? And that's kind of the same starting place. That seems to be I mean, that is a common theme for the starting place, especially we bring in youth because what we've talked about with Wheel of Time is youth isn't as set in its ways, and your work with what's her name? The book you're reading.
Martha Beck.
Martha Beck's your work with Martha Beck's material And going back to McGilchrist is that's an advantage in some situations because they have that young mind that doesn't have the heuristic of the world. Because remember, the adults don't believe them.
In fact, in the section I'm in now, in the middle of the book, where Martha Beck is talking about kind of her cure for anxiety is creativity, and one of her points is essentially what you're trying to do is go backwards. You're going back to that time where you wanted to create just to create.
Hmm.
You weren't trying to check a box. You weren't trying to accomplish a thing. You were just playing to play, is essentially what she is saying you need to bring back. And it is because that is what makes the mind so adaptable to stress
Hmm.
when you're young, is the fact that we are so creative.
Hmm.
You
Well,
know, and we
and they do a good job of portraying that because one of the boys goes missing, the other three are kind of freaked out, but they're handling it pretty well. You know, they're trying to treat it like what they did as their activity together, which was
Mhm.
Dungeons and Dragons, and they're trying to make sense of the world in a situation where nothing makes sense. But you look at the mother of the child who disappeared, she she actually is more open to the idea that something is different going on than just a child abduction or a serial killer or something, but she can't handle it.
Mm.
Her world is rocked. It's turned upside down. Now, granted, we have to be understanding it is her child that went missing and everything. So it's understandable and I actually applaud excuse me, what was her name?
Winona Ryder.
Yeah, Winona Ryder. Her character is kind of annoying, but understandably so, and she did such a good job of it that they're like, yeah, her character's annoying, but she's supposed to be.
She
She
really she
she
really
hit it
walks
hard.
that
Yeah.
tightrope of being annoying, but not so much that you don't like it when she's on the screen. You know, it's like we've complained about Elaine, especially later in the series. It's I just want to skim through and skip through these parts because she's so gosh awful annoying. And it's
Hmm.
uh,
No,
and at
I'm
least in the
talking
first
specifically
season,
first season. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Winona Ryder's acting, she stays on that tightrope, and it's really good.
Well, first two seasons she does.
Eh,
Yeah.
but the other kind of part of the Venn diagram here that I touched on last time is one of the reasons it is so good is because Hopper, the character
Hmm.
David Harbour
I was gonna
plays,
go to him next. Yeah.
they play so well together. As the theme I've always been harping on, I can, as RJ said, is men and women are their best when they work together. It's that neuroticism of the mother with the colder, calmer calculation of the man going, all right, well, maybe something is going on here. You know, I don't think it's the crazy you're starting to get into, but there's something going on here and we need to figure it out.
Hmm.
And so that 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 together is what makes it work so well for both of them, for the characters and for the actors, is their ability to play off of each other that way.
Yeah, and just for those that are listening, we kind of came into this conversation a little bit unstructured, just knowing we were going to talk about this show after it. But I think we got a lot of, especially if you're one of our Wheel of Time followers, we've got a lot of things we can spin off with this because uh, I wouldn't mind comparing some characters to Wheel of Time characters. Like Hopper is obviously the Lan, right? He's the Lan of the series. He comes in at least in the first couple seasons, and then in the fourth season, he comes in and plays that role as kind of like a mentor, someone who kind of steadies the ship with the younger kids, and ultimately the basically main character of the show, which is Elle, which we haven't gotten into yet. But we have Mike's older sister, Nancy. I mean, she's obviously the Nynaeve of the show,
Mhm.
right? But I can see where she obviously is, but also how Wheel of Time did it better. And so that might be a whole episode on its own. So we're kind of just spinning off and getting things going here with this episode.
um I'm curious if anyone has seen anything or heard anything that they consider authoritative, because I have heard conflicting things, and I don't know that I've ever found anything from the creators themselves, but I think one of the reasons the first season works so well is because it is a self-contained story.
Mm.
Yes, it kind of sets up that, there could be more, but they could have stopped there and it would have been fine. It would have
I
been
would
good.
agree with that, except it would have had to have the last episode of the second season where they closed the gate.
Yeah. And so that to me, that's what makes me go, I'm not so sure, is because I have heard that it was originally expected to just be one standalone season, but the storyline from the first to the second season flows fairly naturally, even if I thought they didn't execute the second season as well. It does make me think, well, I don't know, because there is still this kind of lingering thing of this supernatural gate to this other dimension
Mhm.
that you kind of sort of got to deal with, because all they deal with at the end of the first season is the monster.
Yeah,
Okay, but what about where the monster came from?
with just a few moments from episodes, what is it, 8 per season, I think,
Hmm.
episodes through 7 of season 2, with a few moments of those sprinkled into 2 episodes, you could have had a 10 episode season
Mm.
in one, and it would have been basically 1 through 8 of the first season, episode 1 with some moments later on, and episode 8 with some moments later on put in there, and you could have had a 10 episode season and completed it.
Well, the point I'm getting at though is a broad picture. I think um the reason so many people are disappointed, frustrated, or outright mad at the ending to the series is I'm not sure they had an ending until they wrote it.
Yeah, well, no, I agree with you there. And in fact, I
They
made the
might have had
comment
an
too.
idea of this is where they were eventually going to end up, but it just kind of dawned on me as I was thinking about this and the comparisons with Wheel of Time is I think one of the big reasons Wheel of Time works so well, even though it's so expansive, so massive, is the
Because the
fact that
ending was written first.
this is the origin of the story was the ending. Is the ending just RJ says it just popped into his head one day. So that final scene with Rand just popped into his head, and he jotted it down, and then he started working his way backwards. Well, who is this guy? Where did he come from? How did he get here? And another example of this would be: did you ever watch the Sci-Fi Channel Battlestar Galactica reboot?
No, no, I'm one of the few nerds who hasn't.
So it is really good, but also like Stranger Things, it gets a little fuzzy in the middle. And somewhere up there on your bookshelf, you've got Jonah Goldberg's Liberal Fascism. And before he got severe TDS and became unlistenable, I would listen to his podcast. And he is not only a political nerd, he's a nerd. And every once in a while, something would set him off, and he would go off on this rant about how the writers are lying to you because there's this text opening with this ominous music to every episode about the Cylons and how they've come back and how, quote, they have a plan to make it ominous. Except they didn't have a plan because the writers didn't have a plan. Because they admitted later that yeah, we weren't sure who the final hidden Cylons were. We weren't exactly sure what was going to happen and how they were going to get to Earth, and we weren't exactly sure. And you're going, in the opening text, you said they had a plan. No wonder it kind of got a little fuzzy in the middle. And I didn't think the ending was terrible. And I'll just much like Stranger Things, I think the ending was disappointing because it was fine.
Mm,
But season one and season four to a slightly lesser degree, but especially season one, they were more than fine. They were legitimately good to great television,
hmm.
good to great writing. And the ending was fine. I was like, all right, well, that's fine. That is a satisfactory ending. But it isn't the ending you would have been expecting, much like with Battlestar Galactica. That first season was so mind-bogglingly awesome especially compared to other stuff that had been coming out at that time. Um, in fact, it was so good and so successful, it ruined one of my other favorite franchises was Stargate because of the nature of what is going on in Battlestar Galactica, it is grittier and darker. So they turned Stargate gritty and dark, except it was one of those shows that was fun because it was fun.
Hmm. Yeah, and well, this I think to kind of and comment below if you disagree with this, but I think this is where the direction we've ended up going with everything shifting from movie franchises to streaming video
Yeah.
because everything is written season to season now. And you look at okay, so Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings was a three movie deal to try to get the whole Lord of the Rings series into three movies. And I mean, they're 4 hour movies if you have the extended versions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's lengthy, but that was set before it started. And yes, they were like, okay, and if this is successful, we'll do The Hobbit and we'll do all these other things. But you have to tell this story in this time. But with the streaming video now is, well, you've got this concept. It's like startups versus actually having a small business. A small business is set with the future in mind and how it's going to run long term, and you're probably going to start profiting from the beginning. Where a startup is set to sell. You basically are coming up with a concept that someone with the infrastructure is going to buy from you. And it's a quicker process. So now we've come up with the kind of the startups version of media now, where everybody's like, well, hey, I got this great concept, Stranger Things, guys, 80s nostalgia, Dungeons and Dragons, they're in this fantasy world in their game, and all of a sudden the fantasy world comes into real life, and they've got all these analogies to parallel them with mind flayers and demogorgons and all this stuff. And someone in the executive room said, "That's great. Here's your green light for season 1." And here's your crew, here's your production team, everything. And they might have I think they had the idea for season 2 a little bit, the ending, but at
Mm-hmm.
the same time it was here's your green light for season 1. And then as the popularity grows, okay, here's your green light for season 2. Okay, season 2 kind of had a final end to it, but everybody loved it. The focus groups are up. Here's season 3, green light. And season 3 kind of was very distracted from what you saw in season 1 and 2. And it
It
wa-
was
it
like a complete tonal shift. It was very weird.
it was very weird. And then they're like, "Yeah, but you're greenlit for season 4." And okay, so season 4 comes and it's actually good again. So they may have gotten greenlit early on season 4, but then I don't think they were sure because season 4 looked like it was going to a final end. And then all of a sudden, the last episode switches gears and it leaves it wide open for a season 5. And I'm like, I think this whole thing was written season to season, waiting for that green light. And then finally someone came in and was like, okay, we're losing steam here. But if we make it like a Stanley Cup and make it exclusive, this is going to be the last one. We'll get a lot of viewers. And then 3 years later, season 5 comes out. And they do that where they're like, this is it. This is done. No more. And everybody watched it. I mean, it was I mean, of course, advertising is part of it. I mean, you watch the Netflix football games on
Yeah.
Christmas. Every product placement was Stranger Things on that because Netflix was showing the games.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually, if you really watched the ending, you said it was okay. It's still open. They could come in and do a season 6. And I personally, with how bad new stuff is really having trouble like grabbing hold of new audiences, I wouldn't be surprised if 3 years from now they're like, oh yeah, we got a season 6.
Let's make a season 6 of
They're all in college now, and something bubbles up from the past, kind of thing.
well, I could see them in a couple years because the actors are so much older now of making a story that is centered around I'm drawing a blank on the the lead kid's name.
Mike.
Um Mike going to find L to see if he's right about L.
That's exactly
Personally,
the opening I thought was at the end. I was kind of like skirting on the edge of spoilers there, but yeah.
I've seen a lot of people complain about this, but I liked the vagueness of the ending. I
Mhm.
liked the what do you think happened? You know, in much the same way that that's how Wheel of Time ends. It's wait, where's Rand going? And how the heck did he light his pipe? What is going on here? And as Sanderson has revealed now, Sanderson and Harriet and Maria have all talked about this of no, there are things that just aren't in the notes
Mhm.
when it comes to the ending. They were only in RJ's head because he didn't want to ruin the magic.
Mhm.
He wanted you to let your own mind wander. And so
Well,
I actually that is the part of the ending that I have the least problem with.
but you still have closure on the main things.
Exactly.
You know, because they closed the quote unquote wormhole that was the upside down. They closed all that. That's good. Vecna's gone. Everything's good, which is the only thing that they might have had future plans because Vecna was like the protagonist from episode one, and he doesn't get taken care of till the end of season five. So maybe they did have something, but I don't think they were confident in having a season to season thing going on. But another show I loved, so everything was closed except for they left a little bit where Mike could go looking for Elle and things could
Mhm.
bubble up from the past or whatever. Or I mean, the Russians they never closed the Russian loop. The Russian loop could stay open. But another show I loved was Lucifer, and it ended, it closed all of the loops, but it keeps bubbling up that they might bring it back. And I'm like, no, it was the perfect ending to the perfect show. But if you really watch the last episode, yeah, you could probably spin something off of that because okay, he went back to hell and he's ruling over hell with his new, I guess I don't know if they married or whatever, but his new partner, and who they budded the romance from season one all the way to season six. And it's like, yeah, you could be like, okay, how is he ruling hell? Is that actually messing things up? Is are things going to have to go back to, kind of fixing things? And God comes back into the picture and says, oh, you know what? I trusted you, but you could do it. But no, don't do it. Just go with it. Just end a thing and come up with something new that's good. And I don't think writers can do that anymore.
It, it's a combination of I think as we've talked about the foundation for modern writers, the people who are in these writers' room is not as strong as it was in the past. I've referenced this before. I don't know if it's still up because they cycle through what's available on Netflix. There's this great documentary, if you love music, called Count Me In, about drummers, about great
I'm
drummers
gonna have to
through
watch that because
through the
I
rock
love
era.
drumming. Yeah.
And um, one of the guys they talked to was the drummer for a classic British metal band, and I'm blanking on what it was. I think it was Iron Maiden, but I can't remember. And he's got that thick working class British accent that's so thick you need subtitles, even though he's technically speaking English. And it
Where
was
they eat every
astounding.
other letter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the reason it was so astounding to listen to him talk is because he sounds like a moron. You know, you listen just to the way he talks and you think this guy's an idiot. And then he starts going into the theory of music,
Hmm.
and he starts going back to classic jazz improv and the great jazz drummers of the 30s and 40s. And those were the people that his dad listened to and that he watched, on TV as a kid, and that's who inspired him. And you're like, holy crap, because you would think, hold on, classic improv jazz of the 30s and 40s leads to British heavy metal. How? Well, that's the reason that metal was so freaking awesome, is because those people had a foundation of classical learning.
Well, I mean, Dave Grohl's been interviewed about his drumming with Nirvana.
Pretty sure he's in the documentary. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was talking about he's like, I just stole from disco. Yeah, and that was the start of Smells Like Teen Spirit. He was basically doing a disco beat and everybody just went with it.
The other problem though is what you were touching on about how these things are greenlit. It is so you've got the creatives just aren't as good anymore. But now you have the studio people who are so risk averse that they're making it worse. I think that's a lot of what's going on here because um
Well,
they
let's go right into the content for that
okay.
because one of the things they're having to work with is attention span. And this is something that was a critique of mine, which I think there were writers in the room or actually advisors in the room that knew what they were talking about with the, when you talk about the nostalgia and
Hmm.
one of the themes is the Dungeons and Dragons, which is why I wear my half evil shirt, but it's the sessions they had in that first season when it was the four boys is not how a session goes.
Yeah.
You and I have played many, many, many times. That was like a fast break in basketball versus a real session is kind of like watching baseball, where it's like,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
you're up to bat. What are you going to do? This is your turn. Blah, blah, blah. You can do this. You have this action, this action, this action, and this is going to be the response to it. And we got a little luck in it with the roll of the dice. And that's how a session goes. And the beginning session and then the end of the season session were like a fast break in basketball. It's like, I make this decision. And then the dungeon master like goes through this whole tirade of what happens with everything. And that's not how the session goes. And I was like, well, does nobody just know how it goes? Or did a showrunner say we need it more exciting?
Yeah, we need
And
it snappier. Yeah.
I'm going with the latter there because when we get to episode 3 and we get to Eddie running his session, which Eddie's one of the best characters in the series. Everybody
Hmm.
should love Eddie. He's the only bright spot of season 3. But it ran more like a regular session. So I'm like, somebody knows what does go on, except they probably made decisions based on how can we capture a modern audience,
Have you
which
seen the
has very
clips
little
going
attention span.
around of Ben Affleck and Matt Damon on Rogan talking about this because they've got
No,
a
I
new
have not.
movie. All right, so a number of the channels I follow have showed clips of this or been talking about this. So they've got a new movie that's just come out on Netflix, and they were talking about having to fight with Netflix to do the movie the way they wanted to do it. And look, these guys have been working in this industry for 30 years at a high level. I mean, they won a freaking Oscar for Good Will Hunting. They were working with Robin frickin' Williams on Good Will Hunting.
Mhm.
These guys know what they're doing. Yeah, they've
Y-
made some, stinkers along the way, but they know the process.
Yeah,
Okay?
but I'll say that's actually the weakness though, because I use the key term as critical drinker would say, the modern audience. I'm not saying from a woke standpoint. I'm saying from an span
That's
standpoint.
exactly what I'm getting
Yeah.
to. Okay, so
Yeah.
this is one of the things they were talking about. And I just real quickly found
Oh.
four stories on
For
this
those
from
that are just listening, the
Variety.
headline says Netflix is telling writers to dumb down shows since viewers are on their phones.
Yep.
Ouch. Very
Yep.
big ouch. Yeah.
Compelling content can be hard to find on Netflix these days, and a new report suggests the streaming giant wants it that way. Executives are pushing writers to develop simpler, less complex scripts to keep distracted viewers engaged. According to N Plus One magazine, multiple screenwriters report that company executives are sending back scripts with requests to narrate the action, such as announcing when characters enter the room.
Yeah, that makes me think of because and an example popped right in my head of movies or shows where there's actually not a word for a long time. And Alien popped in my head. Think
Yes,
think of those scenes where
that's
she's
why it's so intense.
yeah, where she's trying to sneak around, she's trying to get away, or even when she's confronting the alien itself, there's not even a scream.
Yeah.
She's just breathing hard. That's like a real fight, flight, freeze,
Mhm.
reaction.
And
And
and it
you go
sucks
10
you
minutes
in
without a
as the
word.
audience.
Yeah.
It sets the atmosphere so marvelously that your suspension of disbelief is hijacked, and all of a sudden you're breathing hard along
Hmm.
with Sigourney Weaver because the way Ridley Scott shot those scenes and the way she acted them is so intense, it sucks you in. But now,
Ooh,
as the
can I get
third
us
paragraph in
canceled?
this
Can I
story
get us
says,
canceled real quick?
what?
This is the shift from from predominantly male writers to females. Because we are visually
Mm-hmm.
and sensation oriented as males, whereas females are language oriented. They're narrating the stories these days versus we were
Mhm.
feeling the story.
But it's also the something you've kind of been touching on here as we've been talking. It is the attention span of we, the viewer. Netflix knows we are on our phones all the time, with as many as 94% of people tinkering on their devices while watching TV, according to a 2019 study commissioned by Facebook. Dumbed down scripts that lack nuance and visual cues can help viewers with divided attention follow along, making them less likely to turn the program off. And it's not a one-off. Here's one from comicbook.com. And one of the reasons I pulled this one up is because I saw the date here of December 27th, 2024. There's one from the Independent, and this is also uh from January, just from a couple of days ago. TV brain rot, the real reason television shows are getting stupider. And it's the same thing. Is television getting stupider? In today's entertainment industry, plummeting attention spans and disinterested viewers are being treated less like obstacles to overcome than market opportunities. And here it references what I was talking about. Last week, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, promoting their new Netflix film The Rip, seemed to confirm what has long been rumored about Netflix productions, that creators are explicitly advised to accommodate so-called second screen viewers. That's in quotes there. That is their term, second screen viewers. Those who treat TV as something to be half watched while their foregrounds are preoccupied with Instagram or TikTok or a live blog of the Brooklyn Beckham saga.
And,
Damon,
this is even a step further than 10 years ago when our distraction was something else when we had Netflix and chill. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, at
yeah.
least that's productive.
Okay, so here to me is kind of the money quote, I think.
Or the
Um,
money shot if it's
yep.
Netflix and chill.
But
But
now when I read this quote from Matt Damon, if you've seen any show on Netflix over the years, I think Stranger Things is a great example of this because I just looked it up. I'd forgotten when the first season uh, was uploaded July 15th, 2016. Okay. So it was 9.5 years before we got the end of season five.
hmm
So
when
you
you're dealing
have
with child actors, that's a big problem, by the
oh,
way.
that's a big problem, but
Yeah.
that's a separate issue.
I was
But
actually surprised because I was watching one of the episodes with a friend of mine and she had already watched them all. And I was like, well, at least Max looks the same. And she goes, oh, they got a different actress. A
yeah,
different actress playing that part at a younger age looked more like her from the previous season than the real actress would have.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Well, that's information I didn't have, but now it all makes sense. She's the
Okay.
only one who looks her age. Okay.
So think about the structure of the storytelling, like you were talking about with Alien as an example, because there's a lot of you
God,
can
Ripley,
see.
I'm sorry. I had to say that out loud because I kept wanting to say Connor when I was talking about Alien. I'm like, no, that's Terminator. That's
Yes,
Terminator. That's Terminator. And it's in my head because that Linda Hamilton was in season 5 of Stranger
yes,
Things. And that bothered me for like 5 episodes where I was like, I know her. I know her. I know her. But she had that old lady fro
yeah, yeah.
instead of the long hair she had in Terminator.
Um, but you could see the inspirations from the classic movies of the late 70s and the 80s that the Duffer brothers had grown up with and were their inspirations for this, because you can see, they're clearly making homage to E.T. when they find Elle and bring her back. I mean, that's
Hmm
there's a clear homage there, but there's also a bit of Alien when it comes to some of the scenes where the Demigorgon is going through the woods and about to snatch somebody. You can see that inspiration, and it is done in a very similar way. Contrast that with the seasons as you go,
hmm
as this shift in style from the Netflix executives comes into play. So back to the brain rot article from the Independent. Damon joked that Netflix had told him, quote, "It wouldn't be terrible if you reiterated the plot 3 or 4 times in the dialogue because people are on their phones while they're watching. He
Oh.
added, it's really going to start to infringe on telling stories. Yeah, no kidding. And think about how many times that happen that happens in any show you're watching nowadays, especially streaming shows. But even, shows that come out in the theaters because they're bound for streaming eventually. And you get this. How many times did they stop to reiterate what was going on in season 5? How many times did they tell us something rather than showing us something because of this dictum from the executives of, oh, our audience is stupid and we don't trust them to pay attention, dumb it down.
Which actually, that makes me sad because we all should be limiting our screen time on our phones, especially the doom scrolling. And every once in a while I'm watching a show, someone will send me something, or I'll just pick up my phone for some other reason, and I'll end up doing it, as everybody who's got a smartphone in their hands at any given time is prone to do. And that's one of my measures is, oh, what did I miss? Holy crap, put the damn phone down, Sam. And it's kind of like your wake up call to get off of it because you missed something in the show. If they're making shows where that doesn't happen, that's going to just end, that's just going to continue the brain rot. It's like self-driving cars for us alcoholics, you know? It's going to be like, "Hey, I don't have to drive." Oh, here we go. You know, it's like instead of, "You know what, Sam? You probably shouldn't have that drink right now because you've got to work and you've got to do this and you've got to take your kid to school." So it was one of my measures of, Sam, you're doing this stupid activity when you should be paying attention to the thing you originally wanted to do. And that's why I actually I started playing Baldur's Gate again because you have your thing in your hand. You can't pick up your phone and still play the game at the same
Mm.
time. And so it kind of gave me something to do that now that I'm done with that show and there were no other shows I really cared to watch. So it was like, okay, well, I'll do this with my spare time instead because it keeps me from doom scrolling. It's not rotting my brain. Like, I mean, and I brought up the literature earlier of how TikTok and Reels are rotting your brain, actually reducing gray matter, which is not good, especially if you want to live till you're like 90, right? So yeah, that was very, I mean, was this the thing you wanted to shock me with?
No,
Oh, we haven't
that
got to
was
the
another
shock yet
one.
because I was about to say you didn't shock me because I brought it up before you could bring it up, but
No, I meant
but
to bring it up. I meant to bring it up earlier, and now we've got off on a tangent. I, there's been this debate for a while now in the nerd commentary community about the weekly model versus the binge model,
mm.
and I think neither one of
This
them is
one was better
working.
to binge because apparently there was three years between a few of the seasons, so I actually benefited from binging, so I
Mhm.
didn't have to go back and rewatch or anything like that.
Well,
But
that's what I was getting to is so Amazon does a weekly model. The problem is they're not doing it for the reasons it was done back in ye olden days when you had to get the clicker and turn on the TV and adjust the
you know,
tinfoil on the rabbit
WAP
ears.
Nerd 8, WAP Nerd 8, you know.
Exactly. So I think the cure for a lot of this slop it needs to be going back to a weekly model while you're in production, because that was the reason for the weekly models, because you would produce a set number of episodes and you would still be producing that season while the season was airing. That is how something like Firefly gets canceled after like 13 episodes, is because they were in the middle of producing it. There were lots of shenanigans fought. So there was a particular Fox executive that didn't like the show and kept changing the time slot and said, oh, see, the ratings suck, we're canceling it. So that's a frustrating example, but it's one I think a lot of you nerds would know. So, but the point being, you used that as your temperature gauge. Is the audience actually watching? Do we have something here? Okay, cool. Let's keep going. And now we finish the season and take maybe a little bit of a break, but now we're back into now we're right into the second season. 9.5 years and hundreds of millions of dollars to produce 40 episodes, 5 seasons of 8 episodes.
Oh, son of a.
That's nuts.
I,
But
I just looked up what streaming service is Firefly on. I just canceled my Hulu and it's on Hulu.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
And Disney Plus, which is, I mean, Disney, come on, quit buying the good stuff and ruining it.
yes, running
Yeah.
everything. It, I think a big problem or a
Disney owns
lot
the
of
NFL partly, by the way, now.
yes, that's
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of the complaints about season 5 wouldn't be there if we had an actual, if this had been done in a more traditional TV way, because one of the things that had been noodling around in my head and why I brought up early on, I wonder if it's true that this was intended as a first season. I'm more inclined to think that, like you were saying, because of the way it goes into season 2, is I think it was more like Iron Man. Like they wanted to make a good self-contained Iron Man movie, and they hoped that it would do well enough to get
Hmm.
sequels and get spin-offs, and they could make, Thor and Captain America and these other things, and that worked out. But because there are two massive time jumps in season 5, I think that, to me, that indicates that the original idea for the long arc of the story was to take them from middle school through high school.
Mm.
Because they made a point to have two giant time jumps so that we would end with them graduating high school. Well,
Yeah, except the season they were freshmen in high school. And then they showed the graduation later. And then they were reminiscing.
no, I think they were,
No, season three, they were fresh.
yeah, season 3 or 4, it started them in high school.
Which one was the one where the kid plays basketball? That
That
was
was
season
season
four.
4.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they're freshmen there.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so then they have a big time jump where they're in high school. And now we have another big time jump to have them graduating high school. If we were on a more traditional model, well, that would actually make sense because we spend 9 years making this series, and all right, we're covering about 7-ish years in real time of seventh to 12th grade, or 6-ish years of two, middle school and high school, and it's so it's not as jarring as the actor's age. You have more structure. You're not leaving so many plot holes and threads dangling, but you can't do that with the way Netflix does things, which is you spend all this time in production, you finally get the release. Netflix looks at the numbers and says, "Ooh, people really like this. Give us a second season." Okay, well, now all your people are busy working on other projects. You have to wait for
Hmm.
them to finish those projects. Then you have to go back into your production process and your post production process. And that is how we
Yeah.
spend 2 to 3 years between seasons now instead of 4 to 6 months.
Now, I'd be curious how this will change with AI, but I'm going to talk pre-real AI period, which is just not that long ago. Just watching people who make music videos and stuff and them talking about the process. If there's a lot of CGI and stuff in it, the rendering process alone. So when we finish this little I don't know, it's not a monologue. What is it? Dialogue
Yeah.
between us two. We there's going to be a rendering process before I can put it into the
Yeah.
files that I need to put it into and then put it on YouTube. And then there's going to be a rendering process for it to go to YouTube. Apparently, if there's a lot of CGI in something, even something as short as a music video, is like a 6 month process for the CGI to render. That's
I knew it
that's
was
not only
long. I
to,
didn't know
to,
it
to
was
write
that
the
long.
code,
Yeah.
that is for it to render into a coherent video. So imagine a whole season of something like Stranger Things, which was very heavily CGI,
Mhm.
and they got the best equipment in the industry, obviously. But at the same time, if a media, a pretty well funded music company takes 6 months, what does it take for 8 episodes? And if you look at the later seasons, some of them are 2 hour episodes to render out with all that CGI and stuff. That alone, what did they say with Lord of the Rings? It was like a year and a half for the CGI to be completely functional for the actual movie. after they filmed everything. It was something like that. I think
I
because I
know it was a
watched the
long
behind the
time, and
scene.
I know
Yeah.
Helm's Deep in particular was
Mhm.
really taxing because there's so much on the screen.
Yeah, so you could say, "Oh, well just go out there and film all the scenes real quick." Okay, well you can do that, but then you still have this process where computers are just going like AOL dial-up size, all the way through, and no telling how much power that takes, considering what Bitcoin does. But it's going, and you still have a time frame that you have to stay within because otherwise it's not going to be done. And God forbid an error happens in that
Oh,
time. There's probably like a team of people watching it 24/7, and like the freaking dog in Looney Tunes with his hair up, just watching to make sure there's not a bug in there, looking for bugs in the code. Now, AI might streamline that, but at the same time, it's still going to be a process where we're limited to processing speed. We don't have quantum computing yet. Okay, so processing speed is going to be our limiter. And so if you're greenlighting something, 3/4 of the way through a season to see the numbers, well, it's going to be 3 years before you see the next thing, unless it's something like Adolescence, where it was that one shot. There's no CGI at all. It's just basically they just enhance the video and that's it. That's something that could happen quick, quick, quick. But you do something that's a sci-fi, fantasy, anything that's going to require that computer editing is going to take a long time. And if we have this model, you're going to see a lot of shows where it's like, I don't think they had a long-term goal with this because they're being greenlit season to season to season to season. It just, I think it's destroying long-term storytelling, even though everybody says, well, if you've got a long story, it should be streaming because then you can have 4 seasons of 10 episodes instead of, 1 3-hour movie. Like, yeah, but at least if you have 1 3-hour movie, you can consolidate a story knowing the
yeah.
beginning and the end.
We've also seen the fallacy in that with the Disney Plus slop because so many of those like uh, Kenobi, which the Star Wars fans who watched it hated it. And a big part of that was because Kenobi was originally supposed to be a movie. But when Solo flopped, they pulled the plug
Which
and
was the
said,
best one of the reboots, by the way.
"Oh no, it wasn't. It was Rogue One." Um, I love Rogue One. Fight me on that.
Wait, Rogue One wasn't that about Han Solo?
No, no, that Rogue One is the one where they steal the Death Star plans.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
So yeah, Solo
Okay, so
is
I'll
the
actually
young
watch that one.
Solo
Yeah,
and
okay,
young
so I liked
Calrissian
Solo.
movie.
I like Solo,
Um,
so I will watch Rogue One. Okay, so I will
but
watch a new Star Wars movie because of Heath here.
uh, but but Kenobi was supposed to be a movie, and it's clear from everyone who's watched it, they said they didn't have enough material here, and it shows. So that idea of yeah, let's do 10 episodes instead of a 2 to 3 hour movie. Well, no, not if you don't have enough material to actually make that work.
Hmm. All right, so we're gonna bring this back, and just for anybody who's listened this long, we're gonna continue to talk about this show a little bit more compared to Wheel of Time, compared to other cinema, as we did with Alien and stuff. Is just leave in the comments what you want us to talk about the show, or your complaints, or the things you like about the show. Uh, if you are also one of our Wheel of Time fans, any parallels you might see there, because a lot of the heroes' journeys are the same. So, and as we're going to talk about here in a second, how Jordan got some things right, like gender dynamics and stuff, versus where I think that was one of the weak points of Stranger Things is how they kind of pulled through for quote unquote modern audiences. But I want to talk about before Heath goes into his final thought is consistency. And one of my big complaints about the show, when it comes to the antagonists, which was Vecna, but at the same time, even the simple villains, which were the Demogorgons and the Demo Dogs and stuff, they were very inconsistent on their abilities and what would actually be effective against them. So we would have we'll go to the last season. The thing was hurt by a board with nails in it and fell into some barbed wire and was hurt and was able to be knocked off of what it was holding on to by a kid with I think it was a baseball bat or
Hmm.
something. And then, just moments later, it's in a military base with a 50 cal hitting it and nothing, and it doesn't flinch at all, which a 50 cal would rip it in half. If anybody's seen anything shot with a 50 cal, please don't look it up. You might get some dark web stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, a 50 cal would rip anything in half. And I really think they were very inconsistent on what these things could handle. Well, for instance, yeah, they were afraid of fire, but at the same time, a guy with a spear with a little bitty flame on the end of it was holding it back. And then the same thing goes into the face of four Russians with machine guns and doesn't even flinch. And, gets hit in the face by one of the kids with something, and you're like, oh, you hit it in the face. But again, a bunch of soldiers shooting it with heavy caliber machine guns, no flinching at all. And I think all of that in that one moment where all the soldiers were shooting it was to was a contrivance to show how awesome this one character was when he did his thing. But the problem is when he did his thing, he did Vecna's thing, which was the whole point, was he got these powers from being in that situation, which for those, again, spoiler alert, that was Will from episode one who disappeared and he broke their bones. Well, if they had bones to be broken, why didn't they break when the freaking Humvee ran into it?
I was just thinking you could have explained that if I mean, what the heck is Linda Hamilton's character doing there in her lab when she's cutting things open? You could have explained, hey, bullets aren't effective against these things because of their strange anatomy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, except
But
for in season two, you have the demo dogs being shot up by machine guns and not flinching, and then you have in season four, Hopper shooting that one in the head that's on the table and it dying right away. And it's like there was no consistency in what the power of the opponent
mhm.
was, and it was all to basically contrive the importance of certain people and certain things. And so that was one of my big complaints about the show, and especially when it came to Will, because they had a message behind it, which is where we get to gender dynamics and how the show was pushing messages.
And also the the dumbing down of the storytelling through the seasons. You also see the dumbing down um
Characters like
of the
Hopper.
the message through an increase in the wokeness, because as we talked about in that first season, one of the reasons the first season works so well is because of the gender dynamics um of Winona Ryder and David Harbour's characters and the way they're acting and reacting.
Joyce and Hopper, for those
Joyce,
that are just
yeah,
watching the show. Yeah.
I was just completely brain farted on her name, Joyce and Hopper. And you get a little bit of that even through some of the younger characters as they start to date, become interested in girls, and and you get some of that in seasons two and three, and then it starts to kind of go off the rails. And I
I
should have
think three
saved
is
it.
when it started to go off the rails because that was when they
Yeah,
did all the relationship stuff.
yeah. Um, and it was really frustrating. So I should have saved it so that I could find the longer form where he talks about this, but credit where it's due. One of my favorite punching bags when we talk theology. Um, but that is because Dawkins is a legitimate genius. And he said something in an interview clip I saw when I was, I'm ashamed to say, doom scrolling the other day. And I thought, gosh, that's freaking brilliant. Is the the point about the gender binary. And I don't even remember the setup to the question because it was so dumb and so cliched. And he said, this doesn't make any sense. Why are we doing this? And paraphrasing here is, so practically everything else in biology is not a binary. Strength, height, weight. I would even say apply this to psychology, because one of the first things to pop in my head is something we have talked about, which is we already have a spectrum, and he used the word spectrum. We already have a spectrum when it comes to, gender, that's feminine and masculine. That is a spectrum. That is, you know, this person is more masculine in this way, more feminine in this way, you know, and it isn't a hard line, but biological sex is one of the few absolute binaries that we have in biology. So it doesn't make any sense that we're suddenly treating it like this. And then I would add, it also detracts from that spectrum that is so interesting. Because as I've heard some people say, like I've referenced before, how Dave Rubin has said, boy, he's glad he was, you know, gay in the 90s and early 2000s and not now. Or, you know, maybe someone would have convinced him, oh, well, it's because you're actually trapped inside the wrong body. And I've heard some women say the same thing of, I'm not even lesbian, I'm just a tomboy. But I have people saying, oh, because you're trapped in the wrong body. No, I'm just a tomboy.
Mm-hmm. I
You
just
know,
like football. You know?
exactly, exactly. And that is where that spectrum creates interesting dynamics. You
Hmm.
know, as we've talked about with Wheel of Time, it is what makes Lan and Nynaeve so interesting individually, but even more so together. And that is what the first couple of seasons had that was severely lacking in the last couple of seasons. And it is especially egregious with I don't remember if it was Critical Drinker or Nerdrotic, who in their review of season 5 started referring to Nancy as Nanbo, Nancy Rambo.
That's fitting, especially the last season. Well, and even the advertisements leading up to the last season when they're doing the Discover card, and
Hmm.
he's like, "How about
Hmm.
getting you some flowers?" And she's like, "He means flamethrowers."
Yes. So not only are you making her super girl boss, but you are doing it, which by itself is frustrating and unbelievable, but you are also doing it by emasculating other characters rather than letting them have their own moments as they did in earlier seasons.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the problem with modern writing is they've lost the plot in the fact that you can have a strong female character without emasculating the male characters. That's the whole point. That's what I keep telling people like, oh, I like this character because she's strong and woman. And of course, the people I'm talking to are female. And it's like, okay, that's great. I love watching Rocky or Rambo, as you brought up with Stallone, Schwarzenegger in Predator, because it is a caricature of what I could be, maybe, right? It is something beyond what I can physically be, but it's something to aspire to. So if you want to be, you know, physically strong and, you know, that and be able to protect your family and everything as a female, that's okay. It's okay to like that character. But what's not okay is, or what's not necessary, what's not okay because it's not necessary, is why do you have to emasculate? Why do we feel the need in modern media to, why couldn't her and Jonathan be badass? Hopper, they came around a little bit, but then he ended up being the weak point in the end,
Mhm.
right? But you had a great idea. I actually want you to finish this episode with your great idea on that scene. But it's why do we, I mean, season 3 was the most egregious because I don't know if somebody in the writing room realized they were doing what you said he was doing in season 1, which was being that steady source of masculinity that everybody needed at the moment. And they decided to just turn coat and say he's now a bumbling fool the
Mhm.
entire season,
Mhm.
which is what they did in season 3. It was my least favorite part of season 3 was what they did with Hopper. But why do you need to pull down someone to bring someone else up?
So you brought
That's
up
the problem.
Alien.
It's not that someone is strong. It's that they have to
Yes.
make other people weak to make that person look strong.
So you brought up Alien earlier, and Aliens is a great example of this because Ripley is different in Aliens because of what she went through in Alien, and she is more assertive. She is more proactive, but she's still a woman, and her awesomeness in Aliens comes primarily from her going into Mama Bear mode to protect, right? And she does that without making the Space Marines morons
Hmm.
and weaklings. Hicks is still awesome. Even the the weakest character you would say amongst the Space Marines there is the lieutenant whose name I forget, and yet he goes out like a boss. He realizes, because he goes in arrogant, and then he realizes we're in over our head and it's my responsibility and I'm supposed to be in charge here. And how does he go out? He goes out staying behind with Vasquez to help protect her, and then take out as many as he can with a grenade, blowing them all up together while the remnants of his men are able to are getting away.
Yeah, and let's go to back to Wheel of Time. Cadsuin doesn't swat Rand down. She just demands respect,
Mm.
right? She doesn't say be less. She says just treat me right, and I will be everything you need me to be. And
Which
that was the
in a
difference
lot,
between her and the White Tower, because the
yep,
White Tower wanted to put him in chains and use him, where she said, yeah, I'm not that way, but you're also not going to disrespect me in the process. So she had boundaries versus abuse. And that's a great example of boundaries versus abuse. The White Tower wanted to abuse him, chain him, and make him into a weapon for them, which is what really unstable women do with their men. I think it's Yellowstone. Beth, everybody talks about that. I've never seen the show, but apparently that's the example there. But on the flip side, Cadsuan says, "No, I'm not trying to chain you. I'm not trying to abuse you, but you also have to treat me as I deserve to be treated by you, which is as your elder, as a female, as someone with a lot more knowledge than you. And that's you want my advice. Treat me like somebody that you would want advice. Just like you go to your accountant, you don't go in there and say, "Well, get me a good tax return or else," and I'm gonna and then slap him in the face and walk out the door, right? You don't do that. You sit down and you talk to them and you do exactly what they say to get the best result for the job. Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it in these terms before. It suddenly popped into my head while you were using that example of in our modern parlance. What Cadswin was saying is, Rand, you're being toxically masculine. You need to be properly masculine,
Hmm.
because he was being toxically masculine by being a tyrannical bully. And no, stop that. Be properly masculine. And in contrast to your point of the tower, what is Elida and her downfall? She is the tyrannical
He can't make the
Freudian,
right decision. I have to make it for him. Yeah.
the overbearing mother.
Hmm.
That's who she is. She is being toxically feminine. Cadsuan is being properly feminine by saying, "Hey, no, you are behaving wrongly, and I am going to stand strong and demand, not bully you, but just demand and explain to you why you need to behave properly." All right, so the thought I had when it came to Hopper in the fifth season.
Okay, no, are you going to that last scene we were talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, let me preface that with the good and bad leading up to that, because we talked about Joyce earlier and her kind of histrionic behavior in seasons 1 and 2 towards her son Will, and understandably so. And Winona Ryder did a great job of doing that. The good with Will, which is what we're about to go into, was him standing up to her
Mm.
in season 5. That was great because she actually came to her senses. And you were like, that's what we've been waiting for 5 seasons. Because he was, I mean, of course, he had to be older for that scene. So we had to wait a little bit. He had to be at least high school age, adolescence, to say, Mom, I'm okay. I know the risk reward of this behavior now.
Mhm.
And this is what I'm going to do because there's a lot more than me out there. And she came around. She's still worried and she stated out loud, I still feel this way about this situation, but now I trust you with this. You're
Mhm.
becoming a man. And I was like, great, that was perfect. That is exactly what needed to happen. And then they went on to the next part, which is what you're going to go to.
Right. So this
Yeah.
is one of the few spoilers that I couldn't avoid because so many people were talking about it and posting screenshots and even clips of it of, oh my gosh, this is awful. But there was a part of me that thought, well, maybe it won't be so bad, because there had been scenes through the series that I thought, okay, well, I see how people are complaining about it, but it's not that bad. It's just not that good. And then we got to this scene, which is Will's coming out scene. Now, they set it up in a good way because I'm tired of making this comparison, but it is an annoyingly good movie, even though stylistically it annoys me, as K-pop Demon Hunters. Is the way the demon lord controls you is with shame and guilt. Well,
It's funny because that's how the woke control you, but
funny.
funny.
Vecna, the big bad in Stranger Things, does the same thing. That is why he is referred to as a demon. And to the back to the D&D analogies, is that's part of the lore and the influence that they're drawing off of. And he gets in your head and he uses whatever shame and guilt that is a weakness of your mind to control you, to get you to do what he wants, to stop you from doing what you're trying to do. And Will recognizes this because of his encounter earlier with him, and he says, "We can't have that. We have to open up so that we don't have this shame and guilt hiding in our minds."
Which
And
is
I'm
a
like,
which is a massive message too, because
yes,
I mean that's one of the best things about therapy if it's done right is you're able to go open up to somebody who is inconsequential to your real life at first, and who can actually help you be comfortable with how you can open up about these things. And some things they are inconsequential to your personal relationships, but you're still shameful about it. It that's a good message. And it could have gone right as you're about to go because you told me this before. I know where it's going, and I've told other people about it, and they were like, "Yes, that would have been awesome." So,
so
so you need to be on the writing board of these
what
things.
I was expecting or maybe hoping for was about to happen in this scene was that, because there was plenty of conflict and tension between the whole ensemble,
Hmm.
between various members of this group. So I was expecting, basically an intervention therapy group session. No, it is all about Will saying, "I'm gay, I don't like girls," and everybody affirming and accepting him.
Well, not only
They were
was this, so to go beyond that, not only affirming and accepting him, but that being the catalyst to him having more powers.
exactly.
Yeah,
So it's he
that was the thing. Instead of just being able to open up and kind of releasing this demon within, which is
mhm.
the theme of the thing, the demon possessing you. It was like, oh, well, now I have gay powers, and it's just like, what? Okay, really?
You
Really?
had all this. Yeah, he has superpowers because of the gay. All right, well, what about Nancy and Jonathan and what's his face, the preppy boy,
Steve, the Hare
Steve?
Harrington,
Yes,
who becomes one of your favorite characters. I'm sorry.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like, well, you've had this tension between these three this whole time. Where's their moment here? Where's their, you know what? He's right, guys. We've got this going on here, and we need to air this out. There's still a little bit of tension there, with the friends from the previous season because of, and with that they have their moment, which is pretty good in the Upside Down, but you still have
What about
short
Mike
nerdy guy.
apologizing to the black kid? What's his name? Nathan? No.
Yeah, I was just going there. I was trying to remember his name. But
But and Max for getting in the way of their relationship.
yes,
We could have had that moment. We could have had
uh,
Henderson, saying, I'm sorry I lied about these things. Those bullies did attack me. I didn't hit a light pole on my bike. We could have had all of those things.
yeah,
It-
yeah.
yeah.
Everyone airs it out except
Hopper.
Hopper.
Hmm.
Because in that scene, he's kind of in the background, and I think he says something to the effect, "This is dumb. This is a waste of time." Well, then it would have made
Which was the
sense.
statement they were trying to lead to what you're about to say.
Exactly.
But it was done so clumsily that you don't get it unless you
So
really
it
overanalyze it.
it would have made sense for Hopper to be the one to say, "No, I'm not. I'm no. Let's just go get this done." He Of those characters, he is the one who's not going to open up and share. It would have made sense, okay? Because of all the things he's been through, because of he is kind of a land character. He has something of a traumatic past. He doesn't talk about these things. And that is a
But we as the viewer know it because of his flashbacks. So
exactly.
yeah.
And that is a very male thing is we don't open up because we don't want to burden someone else. Especially, you've got kids here. You've got Joyce, who he's, fallen in love with. He's not going to open up and burden them. So later, when they're trying to execute the plan, and Hopper accidentally ruins the plan because Vecna gets in his head and makes him think things are happening that aren't actually happening.
Which is funny because you brought up the narrating the plot. He actually does open up to somebody about it. And that's the moment he tells you. And realistically, he told me, and I was like, I got that from your flashbacks. You didn't have to say anything. But when he told the other Russian prisoner,
I'd
he,
forgotten about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
he basically told him out loud everything that happened in that last scene with him.
Yeah. So so you make Hopper look like an idiot and ruin everything when you could have just you could have made it a great character moment and a great story moment by he was the one Vecna went after because he was the only one Vecna could get to because he was still hiding his shame and guilt.
Hmm.
And so then it would have made sense and it wouldn't have been, oh, Hopper, you're just a dummy. It would have been, darn it, Hopper, why are you so stubborn? But on the other hand, that stubbornness is also one of the things that helps him do good throughout the whole series.
Yeah, but the only problem is they would have ruined something they were working on, which was the fact that you still weren't supposed to trust eight. Because remember when he accidentally shoots L, it's because it looks like it's like a vision he's having, and you're supposed to think that's eight making him think something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's apparently not, because Vecna's apparently doing everything, but and so they had that plot line where in season two you meet eight, and then she comes back in the last three episodes of season five to have a part, and you're not supposed to trust her. And her only point in the whole story at the end of the day is to be the thing that might be why Elle is still maybe still alive. And I don't know. That was the most useless part of the whole show for me, and it would have ruined that useless part if you had done what you said in the story. Because then you wouldn't distrust eight. You would have said, "Oh, well, now he's being manipulated by Vecna," which would have been a better
Yep.
story to begin with. So you could have
Yep.
done without season two, episode six, and this person's role in the last three episodes of. But I mean,
Well,
that's the analysis there. I think they just were like, "How do we do something with this thing we did?" Now that we have we're three seasons later, and we didn't have a
yeah.
plan for this.
But there are plenty of other things to complain about, which we can do next time. But I think that coming out moment and how a lot of people were comparing it to cheesy Christian movies where
I mean, that is very valid. That
you
is
you
very
always have
valid.
you
Yeah.
always have this really cheesy moment where the person gets saved and it's oh yay and everybody's hugging. It's like y'all are basically evangelizing. You're just evangelizing the message instead of Christianity. That's why it's so cheesy. That's why it's a joke. That's why we're all laughing at it. Even people who don't care about the issue or are maybe on your way, your side on the issue, they still look at that scene and go, this is awful. This is just cheesy and dumb.
Well, and there was again, consistency. They already kind of addressed that at the beginning of season three on accident, I think, because they had a scene with Mike and Will, and Will was like, "Hey, let's play our D&D and let's do this," and all the other boys were like, "No, we're all about the girls," because Mike was about Elle, and that was back when Henderson and gosh, what is the black kid's name?
I don't know. We're racist, clearly. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, no. Stranger Things is racist because he plays basketball later. Uh, he's the only one of the kids that plays sports. Uh, but they're fighting over Max still, and
yeah.
Will just wants to play D&D. And Mike turns to him and says, "It's not my fault you don't like girls." Well, that ruins the coming out scene two seasons later,
Hmm.
because He's like, I don't like girls. It's like, well, Mike already knew that. Everybody already knew that. Except the final episode of season two, he's dancing with that girl at the dance that came up and approached him. So I think it, and you already had your gay character with a freaking Robin. She was already your gay character. Why did you need to bring Mike into this only to like have one of the boys save the world because he's gay? I don't know.
I would go the other way though and say, well, why did you need Robin if you already had?
True.
Because
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I actually thought in season 4 when you have that moment, Lucas is the black kid's name,
Lucas. Okay.
right? Yeah. So um I already thought you had that good moment because um it was such a great character moment between Jonathan and Will in season 4 when they don't say it out loud. But Jonathan basically says, "I know, man. I I know you're I know what you are. I'm not going to say it out loud. We're not going to talk about it because it's the 80s and we're guys and we're brothers, but I know. And I don't care, man. You're my brother and I'm here for you. And I know it hurts because you've suddenly realized that you have a crush on your best friend. Oops. Man,
Hmm.
that's rough, right?
Well, and I don't know why that wasn't part of the moment was not only am I the gay everybody knows I am, but I love you, Mike.
Yeah. And
That should have been part of the moment because that was the big deal of the moment they were setting up in season three where he's crying in the van and all it.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I'm so sorry I didn't see this. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. I'm sorry I was so wrapped up in my life that you
Hmm.
had to deal with this on your own. It there was so much that could have been there that wasn't because all that mattered was pushing the message, trademark the drinker. All that mattered was pushing the message, not writing the story. And this is something I'll gripe about more next time because it goes hand in hand with those stories about Netflix executives saying dumb down the story. If you're continually repeating plot points because you think people aren't going to pay attention to your show, then you're not spending time telling the story or showing the story. Same thing here. It is why things have become so cheesy and even the good stuff is kind of just mediocre.
Yeah, which is why I brought up the point of showrunners versus the writers. Is you talked about moments like Jonathan and Will. That was a good moment that led you to everything you needed to think about it. But then somebody said, no, you have to say it.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
was impressed when I and years ago because it's been so bloody long since that season came out. I was impressed with how subtle that was written. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that was great. Subtlety in modern writing. Good job, guys." Oh, no, wait. No, we can't leave it there. We have to ruin it.
Hmm.
And it like you said, it wouldn't have been ruined if they had just done more with the scene.
Hmm.
But I doubt it ever even crossed their mind because the point of that scene wasn't to have these character arcs come together and have this resolution and have these friends remember why they're friends in the first place before we go off to do this incredibly dangerous, horrible, mentally scarring thing, potentially deadly thing. Is no, 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 no. The point of this story is that Will needs to come out in front of us, all his friends, and then get a big group hug.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
A
and
big
it
group
was it
hug
was
that leads
such a
to
dud.
special powers. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. All right, well, we're gonna keep ranting about this because there's plenty to rant about, and hopefully it's nice and clickbaity.
Well, and
I
also
don't
if
know if
you've made
people
it
are
this
still talking
far,
about it.
give us more things. Give me something to watch because I'm like, I'm replaying Baldur's Gate now because I'm in limbo and I'm trying to pour into work and everything, but you got to unwind. Everybody's got to unwind, right?
Yeah.
Give me something to read, give me something to watch that is not like what I do for a living and depressing. I mean, it could be depressing if it's artfully done, but it's yeah. I do love the blending of art into real life, and I think that's how we as humans have evolved to where we are, because that's what kind of puts. It's the glue to us being social animals. It's not just transactional. It's actually integrating each other's lives together. And so, yeah, give me something to watch, give me something to read, and we'll continue to do these kind of culture-oriented episodes on Saturdays. But other than that, I don't know what we're going to follow this up with. Maybe direct comparisons between characters or whatever comes with the comments. So,
That there are some plot points that and plot holes that I want to talk about because there are some things that people brought up that I had because I like I said I didn't rewatch seasons 1 through 4 before I watched 5, and so there was a lot of stuff I had forgotten about. And then I watched the channel Real Life Fake Wizard did a video called Stranger Things Has 99 Problems, and it wasn't just season 5, but it was the whole arc, and he listed 99 things that were not done well, and a lot of them were dangling threads and plot holes that I had completely forgotten about, and I think could have very easily been addressed if you weren't spending so much time, like that Netflix executive said, hey, uh summarize the plot 3 or 4 times so the audience doesn't get lost. No, how about you deal with these other things and trust the audience to pay attention and follow along?
mm-hmm,
So there are some plot holes and plot threads that were left dangling that I want to kind of rant about and talk about how easy it would have been to fix them.
mm-hmm. Well, that's all we have for today. Anything else? Final thoughts?
No, we'll see y'all Wednesday to talk politics and rant about how
Well, we got
potentially awful the Super Bowl is going to be.
yeah, we got Davos is probably a good
Oh
topic.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That
Greenland.
there's some funny stuff. There's some funny stuff with Davos, and then I definitely have thoughts on Greenland.
Yeah, or any health related topics we can probably come up with. So, all right, we'll see you then, and thank you for listening this far if you have.